Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are talking about Dora Maar. So I'm going to let Claudine explain who this woman was and why she was another fascinating woman in French history.
Yeah, Dora Maar is a really great story, and I wanted to do one about her because I wanted to give a voice and give the story of somebody that's just basically known as one of Picasso's lovers.
Ladies.
Yes, one of his many ladies. But Dora Maar is a fascinating character. She was born November 22nd, 1907. She was named at that time Henriette Markovitch. She was born in Paris at 89 Rue d'Assas, which is up kind of towards Montparnasse, kind of right in between Montparnasse and Saint-Germain, and a maternity clinic. Her father, Joseph, was an architect from Croatia originally.
Oh.
And then, yeah, super kind of, that's kind of cool. And then her mother, Louise-Julie Voisin, was from Cognac, and she had a fashion boutique.
This is interesting family.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever come across somebody that wasn't, Jean Levin or somebody like that had a fashion boutique. And that was that was in the early 1900s.
Wow.
So in 1910, she and her family headed down to Buenos Aires, Argentina, because her father had a job there designing buildings. But then later on, she ended her mom came back to France. And in 1923, she enrolled in the Union Centrale des Arts Decoratifs, and then later the L'Académie Julian in 1927. The Julian was at the time kind of the only school women could actually go to, and that was had been for quite some time. That if women wanted to go to school, that the Julian actually was accepting women as students, as artists.
Oh, so she was like one of the few in the beginning?
Well, yeah, definitely, because the École des Beaux-Arts, like women couldn't go there, or they'd only let like 2 of them in a year. And Julian would take more students that were women than anybody else. So it was like the only way for a lot of the women artists to be able to get to go to school. But shortly after that, she ended up meeting a set designer named Pierre Kéfer and Louis Chavance, who she actually ended up becoming involved with, that lasted over 7 years. But with Pierre Kéfer, she ended up opening it and having a studio with him that they shared. He did these set designs, and she, of course, at that time, she was really into photography. That's basically what she's known for now. As she started to get jobs, she actually reached out to Man Ray, because it was at that period in Paris, and she wanted to be his assistant. But then when he met her, he decided she would be better as a model for his photographs, and that she could just be there and see, kind of like when Suzanne Valadon, was a model and soaked up everything from the artists. And so she would be working with Man Ray and all of the other photographers at that time. That was really starting to become a big thing in Paris.
I love that she's like, I want to help you take photos. And he's like, no, you should be a model and like get naked.
Yeah. I mean, it's photography, so it's probably not all about nakedness. It's such a crazy, the surrealist art, some of it. I mean, he did, like, some of the stuff is there's that one movie. I don't think it was Man Ray. I can't think of who it is. Where it's Louis Buñuel, where they basically show like a very close up of an eyeball getting sliced with like a knife.
Oh no!
It's horrific. I have not seen it. There's no way I could ever watch that.
Nope.
But I did, hopefully Dora wasn't doing anything like that. But in May 1931, she officially changed her name. So she went by Dora Maar professionally. And Maar, of course, was kind of a shortening of her last name. And at that time, she started working with a lot of, in fashion with fashion, designers, and she would do a lot of photographs that would be used in magazines and for publicity.
That's cool.
Yeah. So a year after that, in 1932, she and Pierre, they moved their studio and they moved it out to Neuilly-sur-Seine. And they ended up out there for quite some time. She ended up living there in the same building with him for a while as well. And then she ended up at that time, she was asked to join this exposition that was done in Paris, and then also went to Brussels. And so she was basically would work with Kéfer, like they would have their own kind of joint shows and joint art that they worked on together, as well as her own stuff on her own.
This is huge for a woman of that time.
Yeah. And this is the 1930s. It started to get a little bit better for women at that time, than it was in the 19th century. That's for sure. But she, did a lot of the photographs for, she was doing things even for hair care, as well as fashion. And it was appearing in a lot of books. Like people were using her photographs for their books to illustrate their books. So she, was becoming pretty big in Paris. Around that same time, she also had decided to go to the Alps, and she was a member of this group called the Group Octobre. It was a group of communist leading actors and artists that include Jacques Prévert, Marcel Dumas. And, they were basically at the time, everybody thought, like how in the States, it was the blacklisted people, thinking they're, the communist sympathizers. So this group, she was really close with them, and she would go with them and she would photograph them. And she would also did a whole thing there in the Alps of this coal mining town that was there. And so she went and took all these photographs of the miners and the people working there, which included, a lot of immigrants and laborers that were coming from Poland and a lot of other Eastern European countries. And it basically was kind of like, once those photographs were seen by people, she was basically like, she became huge because they were amazing, and you could still find them online. I'll put them on my website.
This is so cool. I love hearing about a successful female photographer.
Exactly. And, there's just so little known. I mean, she's, I think most people, just like we said at the start, mostly just know her because she was one of, a longtime muse and lover of Picasso. But she was much more than that, for sure. She ended up also working with Jean Renoir on taking photos while he was on the set of a movie that he was doing. Jean Renoir, of course, is the son of the artist Renoir, who was a filmmaker. And so that way is how she kind of started to know all of these people, all of these communist actors in the October group, as she met them through working on the set. So she was really involved in a lot of things. She was, of course, the Surrealist, where she would work alongside, and she was displayed alongside with all of the Surrealists. She was usually the only woman.
Oh, that's so cool, among all these dudes. And she's just like, I'm a surrealist.
Yeah, she just definitely has this kind of like, don't mess with me kind of vibe to her too. Just if you see photographs of her, she definitely kind of gives that off. She was very strong and knew what she wanted. In December 1935, on a cold night, she was at a table at Les Deux Magots in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, and she was sitting at a table. She had her hand down on the table with all of her fingers splayed out, and she was playing that game where you take a knife and you just hit it really quickly, and you just in between your fingers, going back and forth. And she just kept doing this like crazy. And Picasso came in and saw her sitting at this table. She was wearing gloves. And, every once in a while she would nick her hand or something like that. And there's like little spots of blood on her gloves. And Picasso walked over and talked to her. And he was so intrigued by it. There were some things that said that apparently he kept those gloves and had them framed, but a lot of the sources I was also looking into that, they said that was just kind of a rumor. Nobody knows if that actually happened. But basically, right after that, they started seeing each other and their relationship began. He was at the time kind of going through what he called the worst time of his life, because he just didn't have any inspiration. She, at the time, was extremely famous in Paris, and she was kind of at the height of her career, while he was kind of at the bottom of his.
Interesting. So maybe that's why he was so inspired by her.
Yeah. So he was, basically he wasn't really doing any painting or sculpting. He was writing a lot of poems at the time. But when they met, and so he basically, she inspired him to kind of start, picking up his brushes again, and he began to paint like crazy.
Oh, that's so cool. She got Picasso back on the horse.
You got him back into it. Don't you just picture it's like Picasso laying on the couch with like Doritos and like, be lazy, and he's just binging Netflix,
It was pandemic Picasso.
Pandemic Picasso, yeah. But they would travel together and photograph each other. And she inspired him to use this technique called the cliché vert, which is basically using photos, kind of like a decoupage kind of a thing within some of his art. So he started doing that. In August of 1936, he painted her for the very first time. He painted her quite a few times over their relationship. Other than his first wife, Olga, Dora is basically captured more in his art than most people, that he, more than the other women that he was with. In January 1937, he wanted to find a larger space that he could paint. And Dora ended up finding him this large atelier in the upper part of this building at number 7, Rue des Grands Augustins. You could still go by there today. There's a plaque on the door that says this is where he had a studio. And it's also where he did one of his most famous pieces. But he thought this place was perfect because it was also the address used in a Balzac 1831 short story that he wrote about 3 artists. It was called The Unknown Masterpiece. It was about a young unknown artist and 2 masters, and they had this studio there. That was the address that Balzac used for it. So and it was something that, it was a story that Picasso loved. Cezanne also loved it. It was beloved by a lot of artists. And so when Picasso knew that this was the same address, he knew this is where he had to have a studio.
Ah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. He lived there during the occupation. He was there from 1937 to 1955. He spent the Nazi occupation there. For the most part, they would come there and bother him. But for the most part, they kind of left him alone. In the start of 1937, he was commissioned to paint a large painting by the Spanish government that would hang in the Spanish pavilion of the exhibition in Paris that was coming up in a few years. And so Dora, at the time, on April 26, 1937, the Germans, on the behalf of Francisco Franco, bombed the Basque city of Guernica. And this was during the Spanish Civil War. So she was really involved in all of these things, outraged by what this has happened. And she kept pushing him and encouraging him that he needed to do something about this. And so he, also had the Spanish government saying, we need something for this, we'll pay you to do this. And so finally he decided that he would do something for the, outrage of what happened in Guernica. So he basically had this huge canvas, and Dora took pictures of him and kind of documented the whole process. And so he had painted this huge painting. It was 25 by 11 feet. It's all done in black and white. And it was all done with house paint.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah. And so, you could see this it's down in Spain, but you can see smaller versions and, of course, see it online. There's a tapestry that was made into a tapestry. One of them is actually hanging at the UN in New York.
Wow.
But the painting itself is, if you look at it closely, and I'll of course put pictures on the website, but it's definitely like it was at a market. So it was market day in Guernica. And so there was like hundreds and hundreds of people at the market when this bomb fell and killed an immense amount of people. And the painting is of, like there's a horse with like his mouth open, and you could just tell that it's like the horse, it's Picasso, and, he's got all these, pictures of, it's things on top of things. So it's not like, here's this horse standing over there on the side.
Yeah.
You can tell that it's like the horse is like, probably falling down is falling down onto the street. There's like a woman where you could tell she's holding a baby and screaming. If you look at the painting closely, it's so beautifully done, but it's even once you know that this happened at a market and all these people were killed, and that's what he was depicting onto this huge canvas, it's even more emotional to see that. I mean, it's one of his most famous pieces that he ever did in his life. And once you know kind of the story behind it, it's even more shocking.
Yeah, we studied it in my Spanish class, but I didn't know Dora was the one that pushed him to do it.
Yeah. She pushed him, and she took all these photographs of the process. He was an incredibly fast artist. Like there was a video I've seen that they just basically did start to finish of him doing this one painting. And it's just basically he barely even takes the brush off of the canvas. It's just like these really quick moves. And so she kind of documented this. He did tons of sketches for different parts. There was an exhibit at the Army Museum in Paris a few years ago. It was called Picasso and War. And it was all these different things of over time, like he did the peace dove, and he did all these things. But for Guernica, of course, was not there because it doesn't leave Madrid. But they had a bunch of his sketches that he did. So you could see his process before he finally, came to the final installment of it. But it's really interesting to see the different ideas that he worked into it before what became the final piece.
That is interesting. I had no idea the woman was involved.
Yeah, and it did go, it was actually after he did it, it went for a short time. It actually came to the US because he eventually wanted to go he wanted it to be in Spain where he was from, but he would not let it go there until the dictatorship had finally had gone out of power. And that was in his will, saying, I've given it to this museum. It'll go to this museum, but it will not leave. It will not arrive on Spanish soil until this dictatorship is out of office.
That's so interesting. Yes. I mean, he's right.
Yeah.
He's passionate.
Yeah. So once that finally happened, he ended up it's now there in Madrid. And I've had many people tell me they've seen it. And it's one thing I definitely want to go down and check out. But she, documented this whole process. She was, just as much probably one of his biggest, of the women, his biggest muse, that kind of kept him going. Cause I think she was an artist as well. They had it definitely had a trust between them that far exceeded just their romantic relationship. He painted her quite a few times. There's even one that he did a painting of her with his former lover, Marie-Thérèse Walter. She was the mother of his daughter, Maya. She was, when she started up with Picasso, he was still kind of with Marie. So that he kind of would do a thing where he'd kind of, I think, use them against each other a little bit. But he did this one painting of the two women sitting on a couch, which that's got to be strange.
Yeah, I love that he was doing weird stuff like that.
Yeah. But when, towards the end of their relationship, he started up with another, the next woman, Françoise Gillot, in 1943. The year before, in 1942, her mother died. Following that, her father, about that same time, moved to Argentina. A close friend of hers, Jacqueline Lambat, was exiled out of France, that she couldn't come back. So she kind of had this mental like breakdown. She was completely kind of went, kind of just off the deep end. She thought she was hallucinating and seeing things. And at that same time, he kind of had already started up with Francoise. And so she ended up having to check into a hospital, and she was given electric shock therapy. Picasso, of course, was, taking care of all of this for her and finding doctors that could help her. But she just kind of wasn't really the same. At this same time, she decided she was going to become Catholic. She had definitely had in her life very strong feelings about different things, but they would change all the time. Like she was really into communism, and then it was like next thing she was a Catholic, and then the next thing. But he took care, helped take care of her health needs. He ended up getting her a house down towards the south in Maribera, and in 1946. And their relationship finally ended. He had been already with Francoise for 2 years.
Oh no.
After that ended, she started painting. She still did some photography. A few things actually said that, she never photographed again after him, but that wasn't exactly true. She started painting. She did photography less, but she had the house down in the south, and then she had an apartment on Rue de Savoie, which is just a few blocks away from where Picasso lived. At that time, she was a painter. She was even designing stage sets, and she also painted a portrait of Alice B. Toklas, who was the partner of Gertrude Stein.
It's all related.
Yeah. In 1944, with Picasso, she had met an army soldier named James Lord. She would reunite with him for a short period of time. He was an art critic, and he published some pieces about Picasso, which really ticked Picasso off. 1993, long after Picasso had died, he published a book called Picasso and Adora, a personal memoir, and it was filled with all of these stories that she had told him about her life with Picasso.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to read that.
Yeah, so a good thing Picasso had been dead, because he probably would have killed the guy.
Yeah.
But the rest of her life, she basically was painting and photographing. She ended up kind of, she would spend most of her time down the south and then in Paris. But she would take part in some exhibits every once in a while. But nobody saw her basically after December of 1991. They did a exhibit of hers, and after that, nobody had saw her after that. In Paris in 1997, in the apartment on Rue de Savoie, a neighbor had saw her and noticed that she looked really sick. And then the next day, the neighbor ended up calling an ambulance to come see her. She was taken to the hospital, and she died a few days later on July 16th, 1997.
Well, she lived a long time.
Yeah. But she died. She was buried. But it was never published in anywhere until 10 days after she died. Le Monde posted an article about her. And then the next day, the New York Times published one, and the New York Times, the title was A Muse of Picasso. That's all it was.
I didn't give a name.
Yeah. And so, but in the article, it did say her name, but, it didn't even say, this, photographer and artist, Dora Maar and Muse of Picasso. It just was basically, she was just broken down to just being the Muse of Picasso.
Yeah, I feel like that would happen a lot to women.
Yeah. But, Picasso painted her more than, most of the other women. A lot of them are in his, what he called the weeping women paintings. And so there's a long series of paintings of women crying. Because he said, I can never see her and never imagine her except crying.
Oh, wow. So she cried a lot?
Yeah, I think, I don't think at the start she did, but probably later on. But yeah, she lived to be 89 years old.
I thought she was going to die pretty soon when they started doing electric shock and stuff to her.
Yeah, that's such a horrible practice. That was a thing not a lot of people know. Hemingway also had that like multiple times at the end of his life. I wonder if they even still do that, because that just sounds just horrific.
Yeah, I don't see how that could help anybody. It sounds like torture.
Yeah, definitely torture. A couple of years ago, they made this amazing documentary, or not documentary, but it was a mini series. It was National Geographic. They've done it on a couple of different people. It was called Genius, and it was all about Picasso. And Antonio Banderas played Picasso, which he was born in the same town as Picasso. So it was kind of interesting. But Dora Maar is featured quite a bit in it. And it's really, really good show, and really, really well done. And so you could learn a little bit more about her and kind of, get an idea of what their relationship was a little bit.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Claudine. And I can't wait to see all the pictures and everything on your website so we can learn more about Dora. And Claudine's going to be here soon, guys. So you're going to be seeing a lot of live footage of her around Paris. And don't forget to tune in next week for another episode.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.